Welcome to the podcast where we're all friends because we love all things Bravo, pop culture, and can't stop talking
Having
about
so much fun.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Bravo should be fun.
I'm Caitlin Marshall, your host here at Besties by Bravo. Allegedly allegations, where we're in a safe space to gossip, share our thoughts and opinions.
That girl's a liar. That girl's a liar.
About the Bravo celebrities, shows, and celebs we love, hate, and
that's when
love
Chef
to
goes,
hate.
Oh, suddenly now you're so religious?
So be cool. Don't be all uncool.
He went on a podcast claiming he had a threesome with two women from the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
Immediately, I was like, I wonder if it's Brandy and Carlton.
Because sometimes things may get a little, well, ridiculous.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. There's a spider that is coming down. Hold on. Ah! Oh my God!
It's like the Blair Witch Project or something. All you can hear in the background is, oh my God, has anybody seen my ring?
Oh my God.
I don't want to ruin the party or anything.
Have you seen my ring? Oh my God, can you look on the floor for my ring? God, someone's gonna kill me.
Don't mess with me because I will come.
What? Oh.
Feel free to leave that in for whatever entertainment purposes.
I'm so glad you're here to enjoy the fun. So, thank you for joining me on Besties by Bravo. Hi, besties. Thank you for joining us today. I have Melissa Reich of Your Bish Therapist joining, and we are just going to do a psychology deep dive today. Thank you for joining, Melissa.
Of course, Caitlin. Thank you so much for having me. I'm truly honored to be here. And the video, the spider part, I was like dying. I was dead. That was so amazingly funny. So I'm just really happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. Oh, poor Giorgio. He's on here every Thursday and he has to rewatch that video every time. God bless him. He's such a good sport, obviously. So if you don't know who Melissa is, you have a BA in psychology and an MA in clinical psychology, as well as a license in counseling. And so I have seen your content on Instagram where you really give empathetic points of view that are very well informed, clearly, on a lot of the situations in Bravo. And I should also add that you are a certified Bravo-holic, certified by me, if I do say so myself.
That's right.
And, I just thought I had sent you a message back in January and I was like, I have to have you on my podcast. And then my son got pink eye and it was terror throughout the house for over a week because God bless, if you've ever had a child get pink eye, you're like, if you give it to me, I'm jumping headfirst out the window. Thank you so much. And then chaos ensued from there. So you were very kind and patient with me on getting back to you. And I'm just so glad you could join now. We are going to talk about so many different things. Talk about so many different things, but really one thing. No, we're going to be doing Summer House. This isn't going to be the typical format I do where it's the detailed recap, because I really felt like there was a lot that needed to be dissected by someone who is a professional like yourself when it came to the Lindsay and Carl dynamic. And a lot of people, myself included, were like, what is going on when she's accusing him of not being sober and all these things? And those of you watching on YouTube, I'm going to do my best to keep my hands out of my hair. I'm doing it natural today, and I feel like a poodle who stuck my finger paw in a light socket. So bear with me. I'm doing my best. But before we jump into all of that, all of the Summer House and Lindsay and Carl, Amanda and Kyle of it all, I told you we're going to have to do a little bit of gossiping because I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. You watch Beverly Hills, correct?
Since season 1, episode 1. Absolutely. Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
So this preview for part 3 of the reunion, where Andy is asking Kyle about, of course, her and Morgan, because we have to ask, you know? Well, I found it very fascinating that regarding the music video with Morgan, Kyle claimed that she did not know what the creative for this music video was going to be until she got to the set. Now, y'all know I come from the acting world. She knew what the creative was. Let's just sorry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You went for costume fittings. You did all of it. Now, the part that I'm interested in your thoughts, is when Andy asks her about it and she says, well, I'd never kissed anyone on screen, which, Kyle gets that funny little Kermit voice whenever she's uncomfortable or joking. And then she specifically says, and, I was curious about kissing Morgan in the video. Now, Melissa, I am not personally curious about kissing any of my girlfriends that are my platonic friends. What were your thoughts when she said that?
So I've done a lot of episodes on Kyle, and I've talked about, so I have two different thoughts about this. So I think my first thought about her and Morgan is that I feel like Kyle's going through kind of like a delayed adolescence. And I feel that she spent her whole life being like a great daughter. There's a lot of dysfunction in the family that she grew up with. And so I feel that she was bred to be like a good mother and a good wife and a good daughter and like a good. And I think after Lorene died and Mo kind of was emotionally detached, I just think that she realized, like, I go on record to say that I almost feel that had Lorene not died, we might have seen a very different Kyle. I don't know that we've seen this Kyle. So I feel like we're seeing somebody who has a lot of change going on because a lot of emotional stuff, right? Which emotional major events do trigger life changes, right? As they should, we should look at it and say, well, gee, what is this about? How am I feeling? How do I want to live my life? And so I think she is truly trying to figure out, like, what does she want? And, sexuality, the one thing I do like to say is it's a spectrum. It's not gay, straight. It's not, there's a lot of nuance to that. So I never liked the way it was being talked about in terms of like accusatory of like, she's a lesbian, right? We can't be so reductive to look at anyone's sexual orientation like by one thing, right? Just as a therapist who's culturally competent, I just want to make sure to let people know that. Right. However, Kyle is a smart woman. And she is well aware of how she's being perceived. And I also agree with you that she is well aware of fanning the flames, if you will, by doing the video. Okay. So the thing is, I adore Kyle. And again, for those who don't know or who have never listened, Kyle actually reposted something I posted, and it like blew up my life in the greatest of ways. So I do know, well, at least she confirmed a smidge of what I'm saying. Yeah. But in terms of the Morgan of it all, I admire her being honest about the fact that she's curious, and like, that's totally okay. Right. But you made a very important observation, which is Kyle does that Kermit voice when she is wildly uncomfortable. And she also does like the lipping.
Yes.
Licking
at the corners of her mouth,
the corners, or like, and so it's interesting because Kathy has like a lip tick,
the lip gloss
as well.
thing.
The lip gloss, and
from Paris in Love, we saw that.
Right.
If you watched Paris in Love, yes, that was very noted on there.
And when I covered Paris in Love, that was one of the things that I talked about. So I find it interesting that these two people from the same family have this kind of like subconscious nonverbal action when they're talking about tough things. As a therapist, I don't think there's any coincidences. And I think we learn a lot through nonverbals. What is someone's face doing? What is their voice doing? Paris is another good example of someone who uses a baby voice versus like a regular voice. And so I think that Kyle, I think she doesn't necessarily know what she's feeling, so it's hard to say, but she's clearly not being super honest about the whole picture.
Agreed. And you know what else? Something else that Kyle does whenever she's kind of gearing up and she's upset, she rolls her shoulders back a bunch and she does it's almost like this she's done it from day one. Yeah, it's a very
Yep.
like making sure she's not hunching. And all I imagine is Big Kathy, not Kathy Hilton, but they would call their mother Big Kathy. You know, anytime Kyle would be getting upset, getting in trouble, anything like that, straighten your shoulders, straighten your
Mhm.
shoulders back. And so I imagine Kathy, kind of bopping between her shoulders, telling her to, you know what, if you're gonna say something, you better have some straight shoulders doing it. And so it's interesting. You can kind of Kyle has her tells whenever she's about to say something, even if it's confessional. She
She
does it a
does.
lot in confessional.
Yes, she does.
Where it's just this little like shoulder shrug. And I don't hear a lot of people talk about it, but I've always noticed it. Even it's
Mhm.
anytime she's about to say something she's uncomfortable with, they roll back, and especially if she's about to be combative. So
Yeah.
I think I'm interested, I should say, to see what we do get because
Mhm.
again, I'm going to say probably the 5 millionth time, this is not about trying to out anyone. It's
Right.
about the fact that Kyle is doing things like this music video with Morgan Wade because the chatter wasn't what it was when they filmed it. So
Mhm.
it makes it that much more I keep using the word interesting, fascinating, what have you, that they played the clip of when, Morgan's going, well, if everybody's talking about us and whether we're friends or not. And Kyle's like, yeah, well, we may as well give them something to talk about. We weren't talking that much about it when they filmed it.
That's right. That's right. I think that, by the way, your Morgan Wade impression is so spot on. It's wild. That is
Well,
so
her
good.
voice doesn't match her in the way you expect.
No.
It's not like I expect her to be like, hey guys, what's up?
It's this very sweet Georgia voice.
Yeah, it's like this lilting Southern
Mhm.
voice that does not match the
Tough
vibe.
exterior,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
Mhm.
yeah, I agree. I think that sometimes as humans, it is hard to take accountability for the role we play in our own suffering. Sometimes it's
Girl.
really
Wait, is it me? Am I the problem?
it's me. Yeah, hi,
Hi.
I'm the problem. It's me.
Am I the drama?
Uh-huh. We all are is the answer to that. And so I
Fact.
just think that Kyle needs to be honest and take accountability for the fact that the fire was burning, but she poured gasoline all over that fire and then was mad that people were talking about it. And it's like, you can't have it both ways, right?
Uh-uh.
You just can't.
Unfortunately, I'm so sorry, Kyle. You cannot.
Mhm.
Did you see this clip of Alexis Bolito and John Jansen?
John Jansen.
At the DirecTV Oscars party thing, where they are being asked on the red carpet about how the dynamic for this season is regarding Shannon and her feelings. And Alexis, the whole time, is just rolling her eyes. Oh, well, I think we've had enough of Shannon's feelings, however she said it. And Mr. Private,
John Jansen is so private, okay?
that
Mhm.
he is standing on a red carpet next to Alexis Bolino in a shimmery dress at the Oscars party for DirecTV.
Mhm.
John Jansen, that man. I just I find that very questionable about how he's suddenly not so private when he's well, let's
Mhm.
just go ahead and call a spade a spade. It seems like he was not as proud to show Shannon around as his partner around town, around the cameras, as he is Alexis Bolino.
Mhm.
What did you see this interview on the carpet?
I did see the interview and I am well acquainted with the drama. Yep.
Mhm. What were your thoughts about Alexis seeming to be so over Shannon and Shannon's 50 to 100 negative thoughts a day?
Okay. So When I get really passionate about things, I tend to have a very sharp tongue. So I'm going to be mindful how I answer this question.
You can be as
I
sharp
think,
as you want, honey.
I think Alexis and John are both perfect for each other because they're cut from the same cloth.
That was a great way of saying they're both assholes, and so they're perfect for each other. My words, not yours.
Sure, we'll go with yours. Well, and listen, I am accustomed as a therapist to saying really difficult stuff in a really lovely way, so it is kind of my specialty. But the fact of the matter is that John Jansen is, he's claiming that he wants to be private, but here's what I say. People can say anything. It's their behaviors that show us true intentions. And John's behaviors and Alexis's, for that matter, show us a lot, right? Because look now, Alexis is, oh my gosh, she's back on the show. Would you believe it, Caitlin? Oh, how strange. And it's like, she's so put off now that people are talking about her. And it's like, girl, come on. You stepped in the mud willingly. You danced around in it. And now you're mad that there's mud on your shoe. Give me a break. Give me a
And
break.
you did it publicly.
Right.
I mean, it is quite wild, Alexis, I always found her a rather I never found her to be the most fascinating deep person.
She's a little vapid. Let's just say it. She's vapid. She is vapid.
She is. And with that, I never found John to have a lot of depth himself.
Correct.
It might be the kiddie pool. And, it does make sense now that you said they really are cut from the same cloth. I think Shannon needs someone who has the ability to maybe not understand, but to want to empathize with her intense emotional barometer. And because she has a lot of ups and downs, she's a very emotional person. I don't think John Jansen and Alexis have a lot of emotional range.
They don't. They definitely don't.
The very simple emotions, which, I mean, maybe, maybe life is more simple that way.
Well, there's a saying that some wells are deeper than others. And right. So all of us as humans, based on how we grew up, we all have different capability. And what you're speaking to is that Shannon needs someone who's going to be more emotionally capable, more emotionally intelligent, and just more anything than John Jansen. I don't even understand how anyone finds that man interesting at all. Like, get him off my screen. Go away, take Alexis, and please go elsewhere. I can't. He's a typical man who's like, I don't want this, and then does the polar opposite. And it's like,
right.
Why is everyone mad at me? And it's like, again, your role in your own suffering, bro. You really need to take a look at that.
Yeah.
You really, really should.
Well, that's the thing too. You have them on the screen. Okay, take away the Shannon dynamic and there is nothing to watch with John and Alexis. Nothing. Nada. Yeah. What else are we going to talk about with them? What else are they talking about? What do they talk about?
I would love to be a fly on the wall of whatever that would look like. I don't think it would be an intellectual summit, but I don't know.
No TED Talk there.
No, definitely not. But I think that truly, I have a lot of concerns about Shannon because I think she's really struggling. And as a human being, she deserves love and support. She's not my favorite person on the show just because, again, I think she lacks awareness into the way she participates in her own suffering. Shannon does a little bit, which, listen, it's hard. That's a hard step to get to. But regardless of what work she has to do, she deserves somebody who can be present and stable and love her no matter what the kind of roller coaster of mental health stuff is going to be. And
Mhm.
John Jansen is not that person. So this is,
No.
while it's hard for her, this is truly, I look at it as a gift, which is hard when you're heartbroken, right? To look at
Oh,
things
yeah.
like that. It's just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh God. But I do think a lot of this happened for her to be able to say, you know what? I need to move on from John, because I don't,
Mhm.
like, up until the DUI, she was like at his house.
Back
And
and forth and back and forth. Mhm.
yeah, and so I feel like that wasn't healthy for her either. And sometimes the universe does have a way, whatever it is people believe. This is
Yeah,
not,
I believe the same thing.
the
Uh-huh.
universe puts things or takes it in our way or takes them out of our way. And I think if she just quiets her mind and listens to that,
Mhm.
hopefully we can just never have to see John and Alexa. I don't even know if I can watch the season with them, if I'm being honest, but TBD.
Yeah, exactly, because I I was kind of hoping Tamra would really give it to him hard, but it sounds like she was all excited that
Ugh.
I'm like, "Tamra, girl,
Mm.
I love you. You better do something. Don't you just sit
Mhm.
there and act like everything's okay. Better not."
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
especially after throwing a napkin in Jen's face last season because of what's going on with Ryan. Like, so you're going to do that to Jen, but you're just going to be like, oh yeah, this is fine. Inconsistency sometimes is what frustrates people about Tamra.
mhm,
And
mhm.
this is a good
I hear that.
example of that. So we'll see.
I hear that. Yeah. Okay. We are going to jump into Summer House here. And one of the things that I had already told Melissa that I wanted to discuss was attachment theory. And all of my OG besties here, y'all know I've talked about attachment theory before. And seeing as I am not a professional, first I'm going to tell you what attachment theory is. Just a very simple, quick definition. Attachment theory tells us that the emotional attachments we form with our primary caregivers in infancy can influence our interpersonal relationships later in life. And it depends on where you ask, but essentially, there are four attachment styles recognized, which is secure attachment, which God bless you and your mother and father and all
I
your
know.
caregivers if you have it.
That's
Avoid.
that's the gold, by the way, that's the gold standard that I was like, I don't see a lot of this. Obviously, in my field, I don't get a lot of the
Mm-mm,
secure attachment. It
mm-mm.
does happen, but it is the gold standard. Yeah.
It truly is. The praying I have done that my son is securely attached and the way he can be such a precious little asshole to me and be like, "All right, bye mama. See you
That's
later."
good.
I'm like,
That's truly, Caitlin, that's good. Yeah.
"Great." Well, I'm like, "Can you cry because you want me to stay?" Breaks my goddamn heart sometimes. um, but then there's avoidant attachment, which let my understanding is my best example would be Shepherd Rose is an
Mm,
avoidant.
mhm.
Tom Schwartz is more of an avoidant. And remember, I'm not the professional. I'm just trying to give like a quick
Sure.
overview, and Melissa's going to do the real talking on it. But anxious attachment, gosh, well, that would have, in my opinion, been a Rachel Leviss. That would be on here. My assumption is that is Amanda. I find Lindsay to be a very anxious attachment type in my thought process.
Mhm.
And then the one that I don't know as much about is disorganized attachment, which I'm kind of assuming is sort of an anxious avoidant in some sort of way, because I've heard that anxious avoidants are kind of rare, but I would describe that more as disorganized. So I will let Melissa take the mic on that, explaining it better than I am.
No, I mean, listen, Caitlin, what I appreciate is that, when you had contacted me about this, I was like, oh my gosh, I love attachment theory. Because for
Mhm.
me, it's a formative kind of construct for why we behave the way we do in relationships. And so, listen, I had like a dusty box back here from like grad school, like a dusty,
Oh,
I had to
God.
like brush it off and like fling out the cobwebs. But I was like, oh yeah, I remember this stuff.
Yeah. Sorry to
Because
make you study again.
no. Literally, all my podcasts, I literally write papers before I do them because I want to
Mhm.
make sure that I am reacquainting myself, with the information so that I can speak on it with authority. I think we'd all be a lot better off if, people took that care like we do.
Mhm. Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah.
so I'll start with the disorganized, because that one, you're actually right, is that only about 7% of the population experience this type of attachment style. And unfortunately, this is the most scary one because it's seen in children who kind of have experienced trauma and abuse. So a parent who that behaved chaotically, bizarrely, the parent maybe could have been aggressive and even scary. And so what happens is then people kind of vacillate between things when you're in a disorganized attachment style, based on your mood. So some of these attachment styles, they really feature difficulty regulating emotions, because here's the thing. How do we learn about emotions? Our primary family unit, whatever that looks like for people, because it looks different for everybody. We learn how to have emotions, how to express emotions, how to feel emotions, how to communicate, right? And a lot of these attachment styles, the damage really gets done in the first 2 years of life, because children don't have the cognitive capacity that adults do to say, seems like dad's having a bad day. No, they just look and they think, well, dad is screaming at me, so I must be an awful person. And so a lot of people with this disorganized attachment style, they struggle to identify, regulate their emotions. They tend to avoid strong emotional attachments due to intense fear of getting hurt. So, but here's the thing I want to say about this. It can almost become like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because, right, it's like if you're afraid and you're pushing people away, one of the notes that I have written here is that as children, we are supposed to get unconditional love and support from our caregivers. And not a lot of us get that. And I will say myself included. I'm a complex trauma survivor. And so when you don't get the love that you need from a parent, you don't stop loving that parent, you stop loving yourself. And then you start relying on romantic relationships or friendships or other relationships to fill kind of like a void.
Yeah.
So that's disorganized. So let me just touch on, again, secure is like the holy grail.
Amazing.
Amazing when I see it. And you know what? I do just want to say there's 5 behaviors that promote a secure attachment. So I'll just say those really quickly. So a parent or parents that are warm, nurturing, and attentive. Caregivers that are attuned to their child's needs and wants. That's wild. As they stay close to their child, but still allow them the freedom to explore their world. So your child being securely attached, when children feel securely attached, they're like, I can go into the world. I'll catch you later, mom. You know what I mean? So that's actually a good sign. Doesn't feel good.
No, it does not. I'm like, I need you to be sad about me.
It's like, don't you love me? How dare you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, it's actually a good thing. And then the other couple ones are parents who are reliable with their actions. They focus on who their child is as a person rather than what their child achieves, and then encourage a sense of independence. So we can all see like why that's so rare, because, especially those of us who grew up maybe with older generation, I talk a lot about intergenerational trauma. And so a lot of my relatives, my grandfather who's still alive was in World War II, and that affected my dad, and then that affected me, and all these things. So, okay. So now let me move on to,
you say that interesting. My grandfather, who just passed in December, he was a World War II vet himself.
Really?
So yes. So same age range here.
Yeah. My grandpa's 96.
Yeah. He was in his mid 90s for sure. I'd have to do the math again. Yes. Thank you. Sometimes he was a twin actually. So
Oh,
off
wow.
subject, but yes, and he lost his twin. His twin died in France, and so
Oh,
I like to think he's back with his twin now, and they're just
yeah.
causing havoc wherever it is they are.
Yeah, but think about how that impacted your grandfather's
Yeah.
style, right? Losing your literal other half in the
Yeah.
war, coming home without that. So, and a lot of people came home from war still, do from the service, and they have a
Mhm.
lot of PTSD. And I believe our system fails, especially
Yeah.
the older generation. Like the older
Absolutely.
generation, it was like, you just don't talk about stuff. But this generation, it's like a trickle down effect. So
Yeah.
I think we're doing a better job than our parents did. But it takes time.
It sure
So
does.
an anxious attachment style is usually associated with inconsistent parenting. And so what this means is like may have met a child's need publicly, but then privately are really misattuned. And so an example I use here is folks who were raised by narcissists, who they use they look at the child as an extension of their own needs. And so it's not really about the child, it's about what the child can do for me. Don't make our family look bad, don't,
Mhm.
that sort of stuff.
It's a lot of people pleasing as well that ends up, from what I understand, with anxious attachment.
So much people pleasing, and in fact, they deeply fear abandonment.
Mhm.
So I think that you mentioned Lindsay from Summer House with
Mhm.
this attachment style. I would
Mhm.
tend to agree with that. I think there's some other things going on too that we can get to, but
Mhm.
I think that, yeah, I would tend to agree with that assessment.
Well, her mother, if you didn't know this, from what we understand, left when she was very young.
Yeah.
So she, grew up without that. The families look so different for every single person.
Mhm.
And one of the things for children is that integral connection to the person who literally grew them. And it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that there's not a connection to adoptive parents, to other caregivers, but it is, from what I have been privy to,
Mhm.
it's almost a trauma that is inflicted on the newborn infant, specifically, even from
Mhm.
separation from that mother. And I can't imagine having that mother in your life and then gone at an
Mhm.
age where you could remember them leaving. That, I think there is some deep rooted trauma for Lindsay in that. Deep rooted.
Of course. I mean, Lindsay, you can just see in her behavior how I use the example of tree roots. Okay. So when we are, healing, and healing is not something that you have it or you don't, it's a process. But when you are far enough in the healing process, what you develop is strong roots. And
Mm.
what happens is that helps keep you safe from any storm, right? Storms come and you may sway, but you're
Mm.
never going to break. You're never going to fall because your roots are strong. Lindsay is a good example of someone who I believe, because what happened with her mother was so impactful. I actually have goosebumps right now as I talk about it,
Mhm.
to be honest. It's
Mhm.
so impactful. You can see in her behavior that she is so afraid of losing her relationships, but then also is such a participant in pushing that away. And so I think that sometimes, unfortunately, with this attachment style, what also happens is codependency is really huge,
Mhm.
because we're depending on somebody else for our tree roots. And what
Mhm.
we know to be 100% sure is that we cannot count on someone to keep us strong and stable and grounded. That way lies
Mhm.
madness. And I think that's kind of sums up Lindsay in a nutshell a little bit. Not
Yes.
madness. I don't mean that. I don't want
No,
to.
you're not calling her crazy.
No, 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 no,
She would
no.
call herself that some days, but no,
Mhm.
that's not the way I'm taking what you're saying. It's that she is looking outwardly for that support that she's not able to, hasn't grown into giving herself.
Right.
And I mean, I really, you see that push and pull fight for her the codependency tendencies, and then being like, no, I'm like a boss bitch. Don't you know who I am? I'm activated. Okay. Like that is Lindsay is pushing and pulling between those two things constantly because she doesn't want to. My thought is she doesn't want to be that vulnerable little girl whose mother left her. And she wants to be that boss bitch, which she is. And I'm not saying bitch in a derogatory way. I'm literally saying, like, yeah, you go bitch. You know how there's like a difference in my mind, the way if you're like, you bitch versus you bitch, and it's like a total there's a little to it, so it's a totally different thing. But you know, and especially with Carl going through his journey as well. But yes, before I keep interrupting, I'll let you get also to the avoidant as well.
Okay. Yeah. So the avoidant style develops because of when you grow up in an environment where your needs weren't met by your caregiver, or they didn't meet them in the way you needed them to be met. And the key here is that it may not have been purposeful, right? These are parents who may have had emotional neglect themselves and they just don't know how to do it better. It's not an excuse. I'm not saying that it creates a lot of trauma and hurt, but it may not have been purposeful, and they just are emotionally unavailable for themselves and therefore for your child. Because if you can't attend your emotional needs, you're certainly not going to do it for your child. You just don't know how.
And temperaments can be different as well, from what I understand, between children and parents. You know, there was a time with my child when he was a newborn. Y'all have heard me talk about this, but when I say it was deeply traumatic for me, the loss of sleep and the inability to find ways to get this infant to sleep after 6 months of just feeling like I was literally drowning and like I was going to die from lack of sleep. I mean, I was averaging maybe 2 hours a night, and that was not even, I was in hell.
Oh, no.
It was this whole thing. Yeah, it was hard. And not all babies are like that. But the thing is, you know, my own therapist said, well, there might be a temperament issue. You just might have different temperaments for what is needed. And, you know, that's where also, and this isn't me being like, okay, it's not my fault that I've ruined my child, but it may also, like you were saying, to your point, may not be anyone's parent that knew that they were being neglectful. Sometimes we tend to just repeat what our parents did because we're like, well, it was okay that they did it. I turned out fine. We didn't, but you know,
whoever says that,
we
did not turn out fine. I mean, like, you know, we're alive, but like, what's the definition of fine? You know what I mean? So listen, Caitlin, I want to be clear with you that sleep deprivation in postpartum experience is enough to trigger intense mental health issues, anxiety, you know, OCD, all of these things, because it literally, I'm sure it felt like torture for you.
It did. Yeah. And, you know, this is something where I could actually empathize with Sheena saying that she developed postpartum OCD. Mine came in the form of, once I got the sleep training done, I was literally only adjusting the sleep schedule in 5-minute increments. It had to be so exactly on time because I was like, I will be damned if this child doesn't let me sleep again. And I will be damned. And, you know, so there are different ways it can manifest. And so I will say one nice thing about Sheena today, at least she was open about that and open about being on medication, and that, yes, you sometimes have to go ahead and get on medication if that's what a doctor is telling you to do. And that's what is going to work for you and your body chemistry along with your brain chemistry. You know, I think it was also interesting when Lindsay was on Watch What Happens Live after Thursday's episode. It sounds like she's done more self-reflecting than we maybe totally realized, because Andy brought up how her apology didn't totally resonate with a lot of the fans. And I hear that. You know, it was a non-apology. I mean, it really was.
It was, I know that people are upset with me. It felt to me more like she was upset that people were upset with her rather
Yeah.
than owning her role, which listen, that does feel bad when a whole bunch of people on the internet are pissed off at you,
Oh my God.
right? We know what that feels like. It's like,
You were
okay,
telling me that before we hopped on. And
yeah.
listen, if anyone, and Melissa was sure to say, Caitlin, you're not responsible for how others treat other people. Okay, well, you know what? Any of you who come after Melissa, I'm coming. Anyway,
Yeah, people love to come for me all the time. But so I think that if Lindsay has two opportunities here, she has the opportunity, and truly I look at her right now, you're at a fork in the road, metaphorically. You can look at, I feel blindsided by why this relationship ended so quickly, and you're either going to double down and go further into your lack of awareness and lack of ability to be accountable, or you're going to say, okay, this is super painful. Let me look at what my role might have been in this and go from there. And her behavior will truly tell us whether which road that she's choosing.
Well, it's interesting because I'm hearing that there is going to be a total 180 on how we view because we know, let's start with this. It's not any at this, I don't see how it's possible, especially from what we've seen, that it's going to only be one person's fault or not, from what we've been told, from what we've seen. But from what I understand, and this is just rumor because I haven't seen what's coming, but there's going to be quite a 180 in how we will end up viewing Carl, and that it is going to very much appear as though Lindsay was, in fact, blindsided. Now, to me, after seeing that the last two episodes, I wouldn't be blindsided if someone broke up with me. Personally,
That's
I'd be
right.
like, oh, I know what it was. Lindsay
Right.
did say on Watch What Happens Live also that she had spent so much time focusing on the family she wanted to build and less on the lifetime partnership that she needed to have in order to make that family healthy and happy. And,
Right.
what was so hard too, gosh, was the next day when we pick up at the beginning of this episode. And when Lindsay doubles down, as you
Oh
were
my
saying, the
God.
doubling down,
Ugh.
when she then says, okay, but why did you text, I'm sober right now? And it was this grasping at straws that it was like, oh, Lindsay, why can't you just, the way listen, anyone who has had more than one drink of alcohol in one night of their life knows that feeling of the next day going, oh shit. Even if it was something super minor that was nothing and that you are going to be embarrassed about, like, I don't know, like you tripped over your own shoelaces. It could be anything, that you just want to be like, oh my God, let me crawl under the covers and hide. I was expecting to see some of that. Nah. She came in throwing that water bottle at him as though he were the one that was hungover.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so here's my thing. Okay. Cause I've done therapy with individuals, with couples, marriages, groups. I've led every type of therapy. And what I can tell you is that with relationships, when we first heard about her being blindsided, I wondered, like, I really wonder how this is going to play out, because she may have felt blindsided, but to me, I was viewing what you all were viewing, and I was thinking, well, this is enough to completely tank a relationship. And it just actually, in my opinion, got worse when Carl was talking about like his plan, like his life goals and things like that, which a sober person who's newly sober, and a sober Carl is so different from a not sober Carl, right? Like you literally, I worked at an inpatient rehabilitation center for years. And so I learned a lot about active addiction. And I learned that when you take the substance, whether it's a substance, a behavior, whatever it is, and you take that away, you have to rebuild your life. Whether you're 14 or 75, I don't know, like you do have to really take into account, if you're doing sobriety properly, it's not just about stopping the substance, it's about the behavior change, the growth, the emotional intelligence that grows. And so I just keep seeing Lindsay not willing to be a partner to Carl. She wants to be, I feel that she's being led by her trauma. Because, I wrote a note here that I feel like she's conflating two issues. So what happens is sometimes when our parents are supposed to give us unconditional love. And when we don't receive that, like Lindsay did not, sometimes we look for unconditional love in other sources that just, they can't give it, right? Like a partner is not unconditional love.
No, it's so different.
It's so different, right? And so I've been with my husband for 22 years. My God, I could talk about this for days. So I think that sometimes, unfortunately, Lindsay looks for love and support in relationships that she just cannot achieve. She can only get what she needs by taking a B and giving it to herself. The only person that's coming to save us is us.
Yeah.
Through trauma work, through doing the hard work, through looking at our stuff. The irony of this is the love she's looking for is within her, but she doesn't feel confident in her ability. So she looks for it in other people. And I feel that what we're watching is she does feel that she's losing grasp of Carl, because when Carl was sick, he was really easy to keep a hold of, if I'm being honest.
And he was having fun that night, is what everyone's been saying. He was being a different version of himself. He's rediscovering who he actually is as a person without the multiple substances that he had been abusing. And that's the thing is, I know there's a lot of times that it's said, well, the age someone becomes famous, let's say like child stars, they kind of stop maturing at that age. And that's the age they stay forever. I've also heard that regarding substance abuse specifically.
Oh, yes.
That it's like, if he started doing that at say 16, 17, then he was emotionally stunted to that for so long.
Yes. And that is 1,000% accurate, not only in substance abuse, but with trauma. Like Lindsay's behavior is not that of her chronological age. In my opinion, it is of a teenager who is angry that she's not being heard, that her feelings aren't being validated. But what she doesn't realize is that sometimes our feelings are irrational and not all feelings are facts. I say that a lot in my practice. Feelings are not facts. They are sometimes our irrational way of processing something. And I think that when Lindsay is triggered, so when she says activated, what she means is triggered.
Yeah, you're right. And also you saying feelings are not facts, because from what my belief is, a feeling is not wrong. And so that lends to facts are right or wrong. So that really supports that idea that you can feel however you need to feel, and however you feel is okay. There's nothing wrong with how you feel, but you can't turn that feeling into the fact that supports your behavior after how you express your feelings. And that's really, just to kind of put it in the layman's terms as well, in my words here is kind of where you're going with that, is my assumption too.
Yes, you're 1,000% right. We are watching Lindsay feel that her needs are not being met, but she's being a tyrant about, well, why aren't they being met? And instead of looking at, okay, well, what's my role in this, right? Because back to your earlier point is that Carl and Lindsay, we all play a role in our relationships, whether the growth of them and the, disintegration of them. It's not always 50-50. In cases of like narcissistic abuse and things like that, that's not what I'm talking about, but in regular, kind of healthy-ish relationships.
Right.
And I think that Lindsay, because she was never given the love that she needs, she looks for validation from people. And then when they don't validate her, she gets triggered, i.e. activated, and acts out really like a child, having a tantrum because she's feeling so hurt.
Mhm.
And she just doesn't realize the ways that she's going about it that get in her own way. So
Mhm.
absolutely. Yeah.
You know, and that was something else because my own therapist explained to me that typically the clinical diagnosis of PTSD is when a person experiences a life or death moment, like going to war, or they experience someone else in their life going through a life or death moment,
Mhm.
like either they did pass or that they were at the brink of something, like death. Lindsay saying that she has PTSD from Carl's substance abuse. My understanding is that if anyone has PTSD in this situation, which obviously this is not an actual diagnosis, we know we're not, that's
Right.
we're
Yes.
having a discussion is really, and opinions is what it comes down to. If anyone, from what I understand, could claim PTSD, it would be Carl losing his
Mhm.
brother. And I can understand where Lindsay would, and Lindsay's not a psychologist. She didn't, from what we understand, that's not what she even went to school for, nothing like that. But I can understand that she may, from, even seeing some of the clips of how Carl had previously behaved, the claim of PTSD for her reasoning, though. What
Mhm.
are your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
For
thank
her
you.
reasoning
'Cause
for her accusation of him not being sober. Excuse me.
in my opinion, she used that to bolster her unheard feelings, and it was really damaging and harmful, in
Mhm.
my opinion. So I want to be clear about a couple of things. So I do have complex PTSD, and PTSD can be either acute, short term, or chronic, complex, long term.
Mhm.
For people who, your folks who don't know me, I am a 2-time cancer survivor.
Mhm.
The first cancer I was not supposed to survive when I was 17. And then I have a chronic cancer now that is just here forever. And that's kind of how it is. And so for me, I have a understanding of PTSD both from a professional and a patient view, which is
Mhm.
kind of unique. And of course, it is going to inform my perspective. So I'm
Mhm.
not saying I'm 100% right, but what I will say is that folks who are with people in recovery do report a feeling of being triggered or nervous or anxious, right, about that partner's recovery. Because, one of the main things that I did when I worked in the inpatient rehab was there was a lot of couples therapy that had to go on, right? Your relationship, like it was in the active addiction, now is going to be completely different.
Mhm.
And you both have to do things to make sure that the relationship goes back on a healthy path. And a
Mhm.
lot of people who are sober will tell you that they cannot maintain their sobriety staying with someone who imbibes, but also like to a pretty significant point, right? Like, and I'm not here to call anybody anything, to label, to diagnose. As you said, that's not my
Yeah.
role. But I think we can all agree that the drinking on Summer House is like, yikes,
Yeah.
like full
Yeah.
yikes.
It's
And
waking up in the morning to have a beer to try and get rid of the hangover the day before, which it just makes me miserable thinking.
well, and it's just like not the environment for anything healthy or successful. It just isn't. And when you're really trying to work on your sobriety, they talk about people, places, and things. And in my
Mhm.
opinion, Carl's like in all the wrong
Yes.
areas, but
Yes.
he's trying to do the right thing. And I think that what's hard is sometimes people get sober and they have been with someone for a long time, and then they get sober and the relationship feels different. And sometimes the other person, like, speaking of attachment theory, sometimes the partner of the recovering addict, like, there was a part of them that needed them sick, right? To
Mhm.
caretake and to fulfill something in them. So a
Mm.
sobriety changes a complete it changes everything about a person.
Mhm.
And I think that, Lindsay, I know she was like sober or just abstaining for a period of time.
For 5 months, from what we
Okay.
understand.
Right.
Mhm.
So I think that that also is an important factor that we're not talking about, is like she was sober for a period of time and then she went back to it. And I have a clinician's intuition that there's part of me that feels like she's a little jealous of Carl's
ability to stay strong,
yeah.
to finish your sentence. Because do you know what? I can't remember if I said this on my last episode I did on Summer House, but part of me felt like she doubled down the next day because she knew Carl could recognize her. And when I say her issue, as in her, where the point of drinking where she takes a turn. Now, no drinking alcohol. There's no form of drinking alcohol that is actually considered healthy. Let's just go ahead and call it that. I love my
Correct.
wine. Let me be clear. This isn't me shaming anyone drinking. No one is, because we watch the shows. And like I said, I love a good glass of Sauvignon Blanc, honey.
Sure.
That
Nothing wrong
being
with that.
right, and we also know that after 2 drinks, the brain chemistry changes. It's a different thing. And Lindsay, once she gets past those, she becomes quite a bit different person. And I think she's afraid at this point in time when they're filming that next day Carl is going to say, if you don't stop drinking, we are not getting married. We are done. And so she has to double down, grasp on to what she thinks she's going to be able to hold on to, which was that he wasn't going to validate her feelings. And maybe he got annoyed with her, because the thing is too that I found fascinating and confusing, it was that Carl, the next day when he went to her to repair later on in the day, he was very understanding. And it was like almost at this point where like, well, was he kind of an asshole to her the night before? Is that what it was? Like, was he like, oh my God, Lindsay, shut up, it's fine? Which, listen, that's going to piss me off to no end. Am I going to accuse someone of being on cocaine when they're a sober person? Nah. But I'm going to be like, listen here, you little shit. Don't talk to me that way. I don't care if you're sober now. You don't talk to me that way. But that being said, it led to some confusion as to where Carl felt about the actual situation, because he had every right to stand in. I know I was an asshole back then to you when I was on these substances, but now I have been sober for X many days. You don't speak to me that way. And he was setting really great boundaries the night before. And it just went away the next day when
I have some thoughts on that. So
Please.
My thought, and I wrote in some of my notes, is that Lindsay isn't interested in a partnership. She's interested in a dictatorship, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, probably.
And to prove my point is Carl did the next day at the beach what he probably has had to always do with her, which is just ignore it and move on. Like it blew my mind. And as a therapist, the things that most viewers watch and just don't think of again for me, like, are like, woo, woo, woo. And that conversation was one of them, because it was like, he was not yelling. Like she said, you're yelling at me. And it's like, she felt like he was yelling, but he wasn't yelling, right? He was
she was yelling and then antagonizing him. It's like, oh my God, why aren't you mad? Why aren't you mad? And then being like, oh my God, but then why are you yelling? Like, that's how it felt to me. Anyway, I'm sorry. Continue. Excuse my interruption.
No. I just think that if Kyle and Carl had talked about, if Carl was saying how it scares me and it makes me sad thinking about the relationship, which is a huge red flag. And Kyle said, talked about it like being with Lindsay, like you have to fall on the sword. Like it's not just Carl that's saying this. It's like her friends are saying, if you want to have a relationship with her, you have to fall on the sword. And it's a long life of falling on the sword. And I think that it's exhausting because Lindsay is not always right. And you can't have a successful relationship with someone who is unable or unwilling, because I don't know which one it is, to acknowledge her faults. And so what I saw in that beach moment was Carl looked at her in her, swimsuit and she looked great and she's a beautiful woman and he loves her. And he's like, you know, I love you. So let's just forget this and move on, because he knows that's how you have to be when you're kind of with her. And we've seen her relationships with other guys on the show, and it's the same way. It's her way or the highway. And that's just not sustainable. It just isn't.
No. And, you know, and that's not to say there's nothing wrong with having a strong role in your relationship, but there is something to be said about compromise. And, you know, Lindsay she 1000% needed to back down, apologize profusely. I would have been mortified at myself, mortified.
Yeah.
If I woke up the next day, I would have been crawling on my hands and knees. I would have felt like the biggest piece of shit. And I'm not calling Lindsay that.
Right.
I think there's a lot happening here beneath the surface. And that's part of why we're having this conversation it was such an intense thing, because also next week we see she tells Carl he's such a gaslighter that he's like Tom Sandoval.
Oh God. Caitlin, I was like, I can't with this. I can't. It's like, she went from grasping at straws to now grasping a machete and cutting people's heads off. And it's like, girl, you are not doing yourself any favors. And in fact, this is going to be a hot take, but I really stand by it. I think that Carl figuring out who he is without substances is triggering for Lindsay, and I think it triggers her abandonment issues. I think that when he's sick, he needs her in sick ways that he doesn't when he's sober. And I think that she doesn't. I think this is all unconscious. I don't think any of this.
And that's the thing too. That's a very good point to bring up, is a lot of times I think people's behavior, now it depends on the person obviously, but they're not sitting there going, I need him sick. What you're saying, it is a completely unconscious thing.
Yeah.
Just in the sense that we've talked, you know, I've spoken about this with people and we've all heard about the unconscious bias, how it comes from how if you were raised in an environment that there was a lot of, say, racism and things around you, and you were conditioned in that time in your life when you were young to be like, oh, this is how people behave. This is okay. And then you learned and went, okay, this is not okay. And you have to do a lot of work to break an unconscious bias that even if you don't want it, and it's nothing that you feel personally, then that's a lot you have to do to work on breaking that. You know, things like racism is just like the first thing I could think of with that, the unconscious bias there. But, you know, every single decision we make, you know, it's almost like, what was it? Bo Clark's mom, when she came on Vanderpump Rules and was speaking on the lizard brain. And you know, that brain makes a lot more decisions than we would like to admit.
Well, you know, and Freud, for all his faults, you know, talked about how, you know, really what we see is just the tip of the iceberg. And so much of it is unconscious. And as someone who has provided trauma-informed therapy and also participated in it, I can promise you, we all move based on the things that have happened to us. So like, I used to think I was super aware of like all the stuff, like from my dad and, you know, my mom and all these things. But like, it really wasn't until I got into my own therapy. And by the way, I still do my own therapy now, because people look at me and they're like, wow, you're so smart and insightful. And it's like, I am, but I'm human and I have blind spots too. And I need my therapist.
Typically, counselors, you're required to go to therapy. Yeah, like,
well, they should be, honey, but they are not.
Well, I at least know social workers here are in Colorado. They are required to attend I have family who is I don't want to like give their stuff away, but I know like they're required. I think it's monthly to at least go to a therapy session. So
I'm thrilled to hear that, because most programs do not have that in most states. And you can tell, like, I could tell like in my program and when I was working with someone who like had a lot of stuff but didn't want to work on it.
Mm.
Because sometimes people use becoming therapists to like work out their own stuff.
Yeah.
But like you can't
It's-
it doesn't work that way. And so
Self-diagnosis is real tough.
yeah, no. So I just think that like no shade to Lindsay or Carl or people who are struggling. We are all humans carrying around, like I use the analogy of like a boulder of various sizes attached to our ankles. And when you don't deal with your trauma, it deals with you and it deals with other people. So you may be just walking around, but I might run you over with my boulder accidentally because I
Yeah.
just wasn't super aware of it, you know? So
Mhm.
I just think that part of what I do on my platform is just talk about humanity, and we're all human and life is hard and there's no handbook. And so being gentle with yourself and loving means giving yourself the opportunity for growth and to really look at things. But some people are so scared of that they would rather kill people with their boulder than
Yeah.
like, be ready to face it. And sometimes that's just how it is.
It's tough. And that's, a lot of people will say, well, what am I going to do with therapy? There's nothing that can be done for me that I can't do for myself. Well,
Mm,
there's a lot to be done. There's a reason why so many people keep saying, go to therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy. And it's because we all need it. I think every single person needs at least like a year of therapy.
well,
Some of you more, but
here's what I will say. Here's what I will say as someone who I understand that therapy, unfortunately, is not accessible for all, and it may not be right for every single person. Am I a huge proponent? Of course, but I'm aware enough of my privilege to understand that it's not always accessible. But what I will say, you just can't do it alone. Whether it's I do a lot of podcasting about, domestic violence and sexual assault and things like that. And if therapy is not what's going to be best for you, there's free advocacy out there, right?
Yeah.
You can go on rain.org. You can go on certain websites and talk to someone free, confidentially, get an advocate. It's just that we just need a guide. That's all. Like even myself included, and I'm pretty good at what I do. So like if anyone was going to be able to like get away with it, it probably would be me.
You're like been through it and done it.
Yeah.
honey.
And it's just like,
Yeah. Well, I feel like, and I really hope that this has been insightful for everyone. I just am getting back over to the comments here. At first, I'm just going to say hi to everyone. Hi, Evelyn, Kelly. Hi, Danny. Also, hi, June. Hi, Adam. If I start reading every single one of these, I'm gonna get lost in the comments. I'm sorry. I am saying hi to all of you today. Otherwise, we will get completely off topic. But there was something that you had shared with me before we hopped on, and keep the comments cute or I'm coming for you. But you were able to join the Rachel Goes Rogue podcast as a guest. We're not going to say much about it, but Melissa is a mental health professional, and that is what Rachel's podcast has become about. And I don't know if you can even say when it's coming out, just for people to keep an eye on it. But also, I want you to plug all your socials, your podcast, everything. Go ahead and tell everyone where they can find you and listen and all the good stuff.
Caitlin, thank you. I'm loving this. I never want to leave this. My gosh.
Hours.
So I can't say what was talked about, but I can say that it's going to be everywhere because of it was a tough topic. I'll say that. I'm kind of becoming known for like going on podcasts to talk about really tough things that a lot of people don't want to talk about. So that's turning into like my thing. But
hey, you're a safe space to do it.
And that's what I try to be. And ironically, Rachel DM'd me, and that's essentially kind of what she said. She heard me on another podcast and felt that, I was a good safe space, which just makes my heart feel so full because, a lot of trauma survivors like myself, we really do want to help people so that they never feel like how we felt.
Mhm.
And so, professionally and personally, it just warms my heart. But
Hmm.
it will be coming out sometime this week. I
Okay.
wasn't given a specific date, but maybe look for the end of the week. And you bet your ass that I'm going to be posting about it everywhere when it does post.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So
You
you
should be.
can. So for folks, please go over to, I am on Instagram at Your Bish Therapist, and it's YOURBISH, Your Bish Therapist on Instagram. I am also on TikTok, but I'm going to admit that I'm kind of technologically elderly, so I don't do great over there, if I'm being honest.
We'll talk. I'll help you out. We'll
Thank
talk
you. I
because
need
I've
to,
been
yeah.
learning myself.
Ugh,
I
it's
am very much a
hard.
millennial. Yeah, I was used to enjoying posting memes and just sitting in my ugliness when I woke up first thing in the morning because
Ugh,
y'all know this girl does not wake up this way. And
neither
I
does
would just
she.
be I could have my hair in a pile on top of my head with bags under my eyes and be like, this is funny. People are gonna like this and could just post it. Way
Okay,
more.
great. Well,
So I'm happy to help.
you can be my TikTok sponsor because
Will
listen,
do.
I am so good at like the content, right? Like this
Yeah.
is what I'm good at, but like the
Yeah.
technological stuff, I am not good, and I'm a one-man band, and I cannot afford to pay someone
I
to help me. So anyway,
no need. I'll help you out. I'm a one-man band too. I get you.
So my podcast airs every Tuesday. An episode actually just dropped yesterday where we talked about Vanderpump Rules for therapy. And we talked about Sheena made some comments about therapy, and she made some concerning comments, and she made some comments that were deeply stigmatizing. And I just got really activated. And I
Sheena's
just
been activating a lot of us.
yeah, so I had to go and do a big podcast about what is EMDR, what is psychedelic assisted therapy, what are the dangers, what are, all these things. So, that is every Tuesday. And then the podcast video, which, again, is just this, it's nothing fancy, but you
No.
can also see that on my YouTube channel, which is Your Bish Therapist.
And I will on YouTube and in the show notes on the audio, I will be linking all of that. Y'all know I add everyone's stuff into the show notes. You know what, Melissa, I've had such a wonderful time chatting with you. I know we could probably keep this going on for another 2 hours, but
We could.
we've got stuff to do, and I don't want to keep monopolizing your time. Y'all know I can sit and chit chat for far too long. But I'm just so appreciative of you coming and really bringing some levity and actual information to what we're watching sometimes. I'm going to have you back on. Obviously, we're going to have to have some chit chats about maybe some Vanderpump Rules or some housewives. I don't
yes.
know. We're going to talk some more
We'll
for
talk.
sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Friends, please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you are watching on YouTube, or if you haven't watched on YouTube yet. Why aren't you? We've got these live YouTube videos up, and you can still watch them if you missed the live. Please leave a five-star review wherever it is you listen. It makes our days, and it's free. I mean,
Please.
my goodness. And please go listen to Melissa's podcast. If it is anything like what she gave us today, I can guarantee it is packed with lots of incredible information. And you are so sweet and such a joy to chat
Thank
with.
you.
I'm suddenly not able to talk anymore. I don't know what's happening. It's only Tuesday, and I'm doing my best, aren't we all, friends? And with that, I can't wait to see y'all on Thursday. I will, I believe, be live with our other favorite bestie, Giorgio Takunakis. And I believe it will be at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. Pacific. And we'll be breaking down Beverly Hills Reunion Part 3. Oh, boy. All right, my friends, until next time, Thursday. See you soon. Bye.